So again, this is Mike, W9CN. Again, we're really thankful that you're here. We know it's a great organization with Interstate Sciences, and really, really look forward to you take a look at the room. So, we probably have 40 plus. I counted all the legs, it might have been two. So, close enough for Amber Day and stuff. Exactly. So, Mike, the floor is yours. And again, thanks for being here. You got it. Pleasure. Good evening. You live right. Hi. Hi. I'm a balloon of hell. So, okay, yes. Dan, space bar. Yeah. Or arrow, right? Down there. Oh, hell, that didn't work. Oh, well. Good. Oh. Hey. And it's high-tech stuff's cool. So we're a 5013C. Started in 1990. We've done almost 400 launches. I've been with the organization since like 110 or so, which puts me in the old and decrepit sound. It's not as your okay, so we fly generally heavy stuff that requires FAA Part 101 waiver, which we have for a new every share, which is kind of like having easing your head deal with the FAA. We provide real-time tracking to Denver TRACON of all of our balloons. They were out there traffic around. We also have an ADS-B beacon, so we have should TRACON point somebody in our direction. Their ADS-B's come out and say there's unmanned balloon that you're about to run into. But that gets us around that whole issue. Let's see this thing app. So we fly things, and they have beacons up. All the beacon stuff is right now AVRS on VHF. And there's an interesting note here, which is all our comms are done in UHF. And the reason for it is so that we don't interfere with the AVRS. The typical flight gets us to between 80 and 100,000 feet, sometimes a little more. The balloons pop, and then things come back to Earth, hopefully. The parachute typically opens up when the atmosphere gets dense enough, which is usually about 45,000 feet, and we're back out on the ground. We have a tracking and recovery team, aka the Department of Lost and Found. Now, that's our job is to get them back. I'm the Alpha, which basically means I coordinate all tracking out the field. We need to identify where this stuff came down. Biggest challenges here are figuring out who the landowners are, contacting them, and not getting shot. Yeah, I'm thinking. Well, when I started in this whole thing, you can walk up to somebody's house in the middle of nowhere, knock on the door, and kind of explain what was going on. Nowadays, if we're in some counties, in Colorado, the sheriff's department sent the deputy out with us. Because started working at the door of some meth lab. And the other thing is, nowadays people answer the door and there's a shotgun, right? It's just kind of a whole different thing than when I got out here and started doing this 96 or 7. And then off we go. Whoops. I hit the off one. Nice. Yeah. It was ended. And tell me we're ready to go.
I sort of check it right now.
You want me to pause their bone?
Wait, yeah.
Okay. So who do we fly for? We fly for STEM schools. NASA's got a program to try to get schools to teach STEM. We've got to make our own engineers. If we don't do that, we've got a problem. So NASA sponsors these kind of things. And so students build payloads, and we've flown everything from cockroaches to stuff that looks at stars. And actually, during the 2017 eclipse, we flew some payloads for NASA on Wyoming. And I'll give you guys a brief story on that. I'll then figures out if we're really on here. So we go up to Wyoming. NASA wants us to fly 2 payloads there's with cameras on.
Okay.
But the cameras are pointing down because they want to see if clouds form during the eclipse. So there is no infrastructure at Wyoming that we could work on. So of course, what did we do? We built a 3-site length microwave DLR system that covered 7,000 square miles of Wyoming, so that we could go out and collect it up. We had the local sheriff's department give us a escort out of Torrington, Wyoming, because roads were completely stuffed. And so we were out in the middle of nowhere. That you couldn't get in on his 110 watt P25 VHF radio. So I handed this because on time slot 2, I got a ham who was at the Torrington 911 dispatch center radio. And the deputy looked at me like I got three heads, right? He's like, this ain't gonna work. I was like, try it. He's like, wow, how'd you guys do that? We had better sights. And so the other thing was, we learned some valuable lessons about DLR doing this. First was, we programmed all the radios for Wyoming. And we did that because our tracking recovery team was not familiar with where we were going. And so to make this really easy, all we needed to do was pick up the transmit key, push the button, and if you got to go, tell me we were in. And that system worked flawlessly. It took us 2 weeks to build it, get it all running. And in the middle of this, we determined that our coverage into Torrington wasn't particularly good. So our inside guy at the sheriff's department called the mayor of Torrington and said, we're going to put an antenna on the water tower. Can you have somebody out there tomorrow? I said, we did. And away we went. But that certainly, the fun thing about doing this is, this is all great. It's all technical and it all works kind of like I was saying at dinner time. We're kind of like the UPS and Bloomberg, right? When we fight all the time, we know what we're doing. We get it all back. When things go sideways, it's when it gets interesting. And as I mentioned, dealing with the FAA is a little bit of a challenge, but we do it. As I mentioned, we do 70 centimeters for all our come-ups. And the beacons that we fly, because we need at least 48 hours of runtime on all the beacons, because if something goes horribly wrong, we still got to find this stuff, right? So the beacon power is technically 200 kilowatts. And we're at 100,000 feet, which, if you do the math, is roughly how many miles? 1, right? And so for us to know where the balloon is, where we think it's going to go, how our tracking recovery team is going to go out there and suck it up, we must avoid blocking any of those APRS meetings. We need to get every single one. Well, in the early days when we did this, we didn't have all this advanced tech. We ran our tracking recovery Windows platform, and there was no intercommunications between any of the trackers, which made this a little bit more challenging. Again, nowadays, we have people who go out and track and recover with us using a smartphone because they can log into our website and get real-time data on where we are, where the trackers are, where the balloons are, where the predicted landing is, and a handle on one of our UHF simplex frequencies, the way we go. Very simple. Of course, then we have people like me who really got out of control with this whole thing. And the data financing that I super that image today.
Yes.
If you toss that up for a second here without ordering the fabric of time. Hey, you got the hate for your son. No, that one. Yes, right. So, you did like that here. So, a number of us out in the field can ID the APRS beacons back into the system, and we collect all that data in real time over our server. And then we put that on our website. That's also part of how we feed Denver Tracon all the telemetry data so that they can put all those balloons not in harm's way. Here, I did that. Bunch of yeah. So this is my tracking recovery vehicle, which is built on 2001 Ford Externial that bought for $5,000 cash because I figured if I rolled it out, why did it be? I would give to upset. But over the years, things have gotten out of control. And so what simply started off as a small exercise in a couple of PRA radios has got way out of control. And that's a Starlink in a half-wave enclosure with a 5G LTE loaded at the bottom of it. And then I have a Doppler system direction pipe. So that this is the quiet of the vehicle. I either know it's here. And then all the emitters are in the front. And this, of course, creates a giant BS of RS going on here. And we float around to a Motorola SLR 5700 DMR repeater, which we look at our hand, see either 5G or Starlink, depending on what we got. So anyway, things can get way out of control. There's 6 radios, a bunch of computers, and we use it as a test bed for our next generation tracking recovery computers. So if you need some guidance, drop that patient, great. And it gets a whopping 9 miles. Yeah. Yes, sir. How do you power all that? Well, see, now there's a giant story there because I had to learn everything I didn't want to know about alternators. And as a result of this, I did become a Society of Automotive Engineers. But there are more lies in alternator specs. And before we can manage the whole alternator problem, it was unusual for us to be thinking that we had to jumpstart the vehicle. Yeah. And typical loads with this thing running this week because you're wrong. That's when everything's running to loads are right around 135 amps. Thanks. So I had a guy in Detroit build me a 250 amp alternator that was set up right. So at highway speeds, we saturate the alternator. And if I had to do it all again, in fact, a reworking power system, I would put a second alternator and it just runs the technical loads because it's just such a squirrel. And in modern vehicles, my car out there right now is inscrutable power system. Okay. It runs anywhere from 11.9 volts to 15.4. And the rapid acceleration turns off the alternator. So you can watch the bus voltage drop. You do it at 0 to 60 sprint because it wants the 3 horsepower that the alternator using this thing from 0 to 60 times. But I will happily, I have a whole presentation on vehicle power systems and all of the head banging, air pulling, and fuse popping, and jump starting that we did to get that. There we go. So ground station, we have a ground station. The ground station's job is to keep track of all of those people out in the field and communicate with the FAA and make sure that before we launch everything, all the beacons work. Because there's nothing worse than setting one of these up and not being able to track it. Because there's anywhere from 50 to 150 kids who are really disappointed at their experiments that they built. Like I said, anything from cockroaches. By the way, cockroaches will survive a trip to near space. I mean, right. Because we all about it. Like my favorite ones are the candy ducks. Peeps. We float peeps. And they come back and they're rock solid because it sucks all the air out. Right? And you can use it as scammers. Marshmallows to back about this big. And those things you can fire with pellet guns. Well, we have a ground station. This is a ACNC Channel 4 satellite truck. They donated it to us. And of course, that's ideal for us because it's got racks. But 60-watt genset in it and all the stuff they can do for a ground station. Our ground station guys used to set up on a couple of card tables, which when you're flying in December, it's 20 degrees outside. It gets a little cold when you're sitting out there for about 3 hours. So this was a huge bonus for ground station people. Then of course things get out of control. How do we know that? They have a cappuccino maker on board. And a Keurig machine. I'll swing by the launch site just to get a couple of hits of caffeine at 4 o'clock in the morning. And of course, it's got Starlink and my GLT balloons and a whole bunch of radios in it and all kinds of fun stuff. And it takes all the fun out of the ground station work. You just pull up your own gear with it. So filling balloons, right? We have a whole crew of gas passers. And if you're old enough to remember the movie MASH, right? You know what our gas passers are. A number of years ago, we used to fly with helium, and helium became so expensive it was financially impossible to do it anymore. So we made the conversion to the Hindenburg Express. And we've been running hydrogen down for well over a decade with an area problem. Of course, we have a no smoking light. Anybody shows up with cigars and when we're filling things, it's not good. The key here is managing how much gas we put in the envelope to successfully lift the payloads. So we will weigh every single payload as we put the flight string together. That information will be given to the gas passing crowd, who then will put a bunch of weight into a bag and then put enough gas in it to have a correct lift. And there's some magic formulas that are done to make all that work. There's still a fair amount of, I think we got enough in there. As I mentioned, students build their payloads. These all get weighed. We run a flight straight through the center of all their payloads. Then we make them stand up in the 20-degree weather, the shortest of their lives, and get them launched. This is a relatively critical portion, which is, of course, why we weigh things again, and we manage getting all that stuff put together, because there's nothing worse than having the top part of the flight string come home than the bottom half not. So the quick story was, for a number of years, we ran a crossband repeater, which should give you about 400 miles of torque. It's kind of cool. The guy that used to do those, thanked for that. You remember when we used to have Sunday newspapers, cops, right? remember what color those bags were? It's orange, right? So this guy being frugal would always wrap the crossband repeater in an orange bag. It was always on the bottom of the flight string. So one day on Sunday, the crossband repeater came off the bottom of the flight string into a neighborhood with all kinds of orange wrapper Sunday newspapers. And of course, how did we figure out where it was? Well, we drove around and looked for the house that had two Sunday newspapers.
Did you find it?
Yes. And we did that then as well. So what does a flight string look like? Well, obviously we have a balloon. We have a cut down system. So if something goes horribly off, it does. We have some way to cut the balloon off. Or if we have customers with specific height requirements, we did some work for NOAA on something called an air core. And so what an air core was, it's 4-inch stainless steel tubing, 300 feet of it, and a coil about this big around. That weighs about 40 pounds. And so what they would do is they would fly this up to 85,000 feet. At this point, 99.9% of the atmosphere is out of this, because one end of it's tagged off, right? Sealed. The other end's up the atmosphere with a valve. So when you get up, it unloads everything in the coil. We drop it from 85,000 feet. As it comes down, it is now sampling the atmosphere because we have very specific. At what time are you at this level? When it gets to the ground, we've got 20 minutes to go out there and throw the valve. They take it and they suck it through some sort of gas chromatograph thing of a bomb. And it allows them to determine how much CO2 is in the atmosphere at what altitudes. And what they found out was that there are little like balloons of CO2 that move through the atmosphere, because they found that we were dropping these 2 or 3 at a time. And those were really big lifts. Those all had to be released at 85,000 feet. The NASA project for 2017, we had to get 80,000 feet looking down at totality. And we hit that one right on the numbers because they wanted to see the clouds forming when it got dark. And by the way, the answer was yes. We have a parachute, hot PRS beacon, student payloads. This could be anywhere from 60 to 80 feet long. There's an ADS-B beacon, which basically talks to every aircraft in big range. It says, hi, I'm an unmanned balloon. You need to move. And then we have a lot of APRS beacons. So we fly dual APRS beacons up different frequencies. Why? Because when we didn't, bad things happen. Vacuum teams. This is the most fun you can have in amateur radio in vehicles with your clothes on. It's like doing a road rally where you make up as you go. And we can be anywhere from 10 miles down range to 90 miles down range to pick these monsters up. Typically, 5 to 7 vehicles. We try to have 2 people in every vehicle. Somebody in the advantage looking at the computer or figuring out what cross street you're going to try to make a Tokyo night drift into at 8 miles an hour. Communicating where R54, where are you? Kind of thing. We can also do a manual over and cut down if necessary as a tension. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the tech that we've done. So this is a pre-flight prediction. And this is launching up Wiggins with a potential landing at Burlington, Colorado, which is a whole bunch of driving.
Yeah, it is.
And well, in the middle of COVID, we put a DMR site in it, Burlington, and so we needed Eastern coverage just because we didn't have any, and there wasn't anything in Burlington. So my digging is in the broadcast industry, so I was like, we need a tower. So I found a PM out here, 408 foot stick, call sign KN8E, and talked to the guy, robbed him a bunch of gear that my company builds for us to get some amateur on the tower. Now, everybody knows what the problem is with AO, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the tower is electrically hot. The good news was it wasn't a lot electrically hot. It wasn't 50 kilowatt, right? It was only a lighter 1 kilowatt. And the guy was very nice about it. AT&T had a amp site there, advanced low flow service, that they'd abandoned, but they let the industry 5/8 Heliox on the tower on 5 kilovolt insulators. Right? So we went up there and pressurized the line, and it did no meter test on it, and that was all solid. Great. Now I would go on some tests. So I found a company in Ohio that builds switchgear insulators, and I said I needed 5 kilovolt switchgear insulators. Now let me do that for you. It was great. I would use some shear force instead of up and down. And the good news was they had one of their engineer guys was waiting for us. And he's like, I'll run the calculations for it. So we ordered those and they showed up. There's one little problem they didn't tell us about. The inserts were aluminum.
Oh, Jesus.
So you can't use galvanized hardware on aluminum. So we had to come up with nickel plated hardware so that it wouldn't go far. And from that site, a lot of UHF DMR is at 300 feet, roughly 360, so 480 foot stick. And it's an MTR 3000, and you can hit that site from Flagler on a 5-watt handheld from inside my truck. Oh. So that coverage was really good. We also tossed a Colorado Connection EHF machine in there under the heading of why not? But it's great because now we have coverage. Then there are things like this that happen. Not groups. So, as long as I've been with the operation, we've had a lot of example in 25 years, roughly. And, the first thing we do is get out of the car, go, the local power company days. And in one instance, we had a really bad day, and we flew out, 1,500 customers off the car for a little bit while he sort of go out. But, the power guy came out, and he was very nice about it. We threw $20 through his beer pot, and then we collected it up, and we didn't start any fires. We didn't turn anybody into beachers on the lot. So it's like that. It was fine. All in all, it was a good day. I was like, yes.
How long was the average time for the balloon to climb to 100?
Set time roughly is about, depends on the set rate. So typically we try to get the gas passers to right between 1,200 and 1,600 feet a minute. Okay. So you roughly, and remember our altitude is measured from sea level. So you got to subtract wherever we're at, right? So you're looking at roughly 90 minutes up. And then on the way back down, we got about 45 minutes first. So from where are we deploying bodies? If we go back and look at this, roughly. But you go backwards.
There you go.
Right. So on this flight, where did we park our second recovery team? Well, historically, I know that we're going to be short by 10 miles or so, right? And then some of that's going to change because this is done the day before, and when's log change, right? And so typically, what I'm always asked when I'm on DMR, and so the really great thing about DMR, when you have your own repeater in the back of the stop, is you're never out of coverage. Okay. The downside is we had to run this thing through 10 dB pad because even at the low power setting, it was generating so much stuff, and we had so many other things that didn't like hearing that. So, but typically, well, first off, the tracking recovery team operates on its stomach. So they'll be at breakfast, usually at 11. That's time on it. Okay. Because I don't know about you guys, but a couple of eggs, a gallon or two of coffee, and an automatic electronic defibrillator, blood Schultz are good. And then we'll kind of head out, figure out where we're going to go. But typically, I'd be looking at making, because I'm an old guy, making a Bible break at Seabirds. Okay. See, show my hands. Who's been dating their urologists? So I went. So anyway, I think we stopped at Seabird just to kind of see where things were going. And of course, it was short because the winds were different, right? And we finally collected that thing right about here. But you need to kind of stage your current. You get a feel for it eventually. You really don't want to go more to the predicted landing because it's time. Okay. Well, we have all this amazing tech that helps us figure out where the CP is going. And I'm just doing it now that I think I've figured out it's work. So I just want to point out a couple of things. As I mentioned earlier, when I started this thing, strumming on somebody's door, right? We'd have a nice chat. And if it was a young farmer with a family, they'd come out, they'd all brought fuel with us. It was the most exciting thing to get at in years. And it's great. And then slowly, the world changed. And now one of my jobs is to notify the local sheriff's department where we think we're going to land, what those cross streets are, and to give them a heads up with all of our cell phone numbers, how many people are going to be out there, what time we think this thing's going to land, because inevitably they're going to get calls, right? And we've been doing this for such a long time now that we've developed a relationship, and they know we're coming. We send them an email. It's all good. Nobody gets shot. But that's what we do, right? It's just giving everybody a heads up. 4 or 5 years ago, we did somebody programmed the radio incorrectly. It was jamming your DMR repeater in your park. And so they called us out because we tracked that kind of stuff down. The first thing I did was call Parker's chief of police and said, you're going to find a whole bunch of vehicles driving through subdivisions with antennas on them, a bunch of geeky guys, else, trying to find us and don't shoot us. And giving the local law enforcement folks a heads up. Unfortunately, it's now required. This is typically what it looks like when these things land in somebody's field somewhere. Got a bunch of students. We try to get them out of the field if it's safe. We also try to make sure that they got real shoes. Because there's yucca, there's all kinds of stuff out here. And we won't let kids out here in shorts, right? And if there's any cattle or stuff like that, we don't let them out at all. We just don't do it. So we build a bunch of our own payloads too. can't just walk in the HRO and say, I need an APRS vehicle to contact. Right? And of course, that required custom mechanical work. And then all of this stuff has to be flight qualified. And one of the things that always gets this, GPS receivers usually don't fly about 35,000 feet without some software hacked into their phone or turned it off. So we have a whole team that designs and builds this stuff. We never see them out in the field. They just turn this stuff out and we go fly with it. And it's really great because they're absolute geniuses. One of the things that is real important is in the balloon release after it pops, because if it doesn't, it can entangle itself into the parachute. And that means instead of us having 45 minutes from when it pops for us to get on the ground, it's about 12. Okay. And usually that thing's having to do a lot of payloads at those kind of speeds. It's not unusual to hit 6,000 or 7,000 feet a minute descent rates that way. Okay. And usually we like to be in the 900 feet a minute kind of range on the way down. And you can see that, things end up in a puddle in somebody's cornfield, which is never good. And all this latex is there, bad things happen. So the release mechanism we've worked on for a number of years to get this all happen. And so we have an accelerometer in these things, right? And they look for free fall. Well, free fall means, guess what? Balloons pop, right? So it trips the mechanical release system, which, if everything works, should release the balloon. Now, as you can see here, we go from almost 4 Gs positive to about 3 Gs negative in about like that. And it's not unusual for the bottom of a flight stream to come up, meet the top of a flight stream. And occasionally we use things like antennas to grow off, which is another reason why we're in dual APRS speeds. If you lose one, we've got at least so get it back. And you can see free fall, and then the garbage down here is where we crashed and get dragged around, hopefully not for a very long distance. So the release system is armed at 70,000 feet. Will not release the balloon unless you into. Now, if something goes wrong, occasionally does, and we get a burst below 70, then we've got a problem. The accelerometer detects free fall, release command sent by a Bluetooth LE link. The APRS message is transmitted that says, hey, wake up, drop your coffee, and come on, get us. And that gives us max altitude. And then there's a successful release and separation. Status is transmitted using APRS Morse code. It's okay. And typical release time is less than a second, so it's pretty quick. But again, our team built all that stuff. Here's some pictures that printed circuit cards or hot stuff. The guy that does this work is jury some sort of toaster oven to get it hot enough to surface pop this stuff. And get somebody in China to make the PC boards, and there's like 4 layers in there, and all that goes together. It's magic. And some of the big parts here is switching regulator, Apple processor, Bluetooth module, serial config port, status LEDs, like, are you good before you launch it, kind of thing. There's a GPS USB hub, GPS antenna, local noticing accelerometer configuration ports. There's 3 cards that go into this. This is our APRS transmitter, which is a Chinese public counter. And so we started using these. We had a real problem. We weren't getting good APRS data And so we dug around and found out that they ship these narrow. So then we had to figure out how to hack the firmware to make it wideband. Once we did that, then the PRA's packets all worked. But these are why this doesn't qualify to figure out why it doesn't work. And that's an assembly of the batteries and how that all goes together. Temperatures are kind of fun, right? At 100,000 feet, it's it's minus 61 degrees Fahrenheit at 42,000 feet. And we just insulate the box. We don't actually run heaters out. It's really not necessary. And on top of that, then we have the batteries around the heaters. And that, of course, gets you around the east light. Well, we have a whole series of radiacs that built this thing, all those one or 22 things. But so we have an SDR-based sticky recovery system. It runs on one of these things. This is some Chinese industrial PC with some Intel processor on it. These are Gen 1 boxes. These replace the Windows computer laptops that were running that kind of worked. And when they didn't, we were out in the field on where we think this in lab. So this runs a Linux-based operating system. We have a bunch of geniuses that make this all work. Anytime this thing's connected to the internet, it uses some PPM or a server, it updates all its software, it downloads the flight grounders for the next flight, and you're ready to go. So I usually travel with a couple of these because I'm beta testing the next generation software. Where do we go from here? Raspberry Pi 5s. And we're doing that testing right now. Of course, if you have a smartphone and you've dialed into our server, you get all the guts of that on your smartphone and the display for it. So we're using a new electric $29 or $49 materials or $4,000 there. SDR, USB dongle with a 2-meter antenna, GPS plugs into this thing. The Wi-Fi network is HTML5. You can do it on a smartphone or anything. Doesn't matter. Off it goes. Some of the data that we get, we set, if we're flying 2 balloons, we have 4 EPRS frequencies and all that to be looked at the same time. This is why the SDR thing works really well. Now, our next gen boxes take the whole 2-meter band out of and digest it into multi-cast ID packing system, which means I can have as many of those in my truck as I want, and it'll get all the data listed in each channel I want. Bill Karn, who's a handout out of San Diego, today something. Yep, developed that software. Our guys open sourced it. Our guys took it. We're like, this is cool. What are we going to do with it? And away we went. This is some of the setup stuff. Data. So we have these nice little panels that show you things like speed, set rate, and you can got like green, red, yellow, things you want to know. Altitude, we're at 77,000 feet. We're ascending at 844 feet a minute. Speed is 10 miles an hour, and we're at 328 degrees. Off we go. Recent packing positions, more data that you can possibly deal with. Frankly, it's more data than I can deal with. I'm driving 80 miles an hour around the road. The most important part of this is the display, which is kind of where you want to conduct. So we've got predicted landing. We talked about it. We're not going to be there, right? It's not going to work. Actually, so this is the real-time predicted landing. This is Golf Bravo. Juliet's up here. I'm probably lost. But this blue line was where it was going to, the initial prediction where it was going to land. And as you can see, our dynamic predicted landing is 20 miles short. Not unusual, again, because of the weather. So here's a lunar flight. Predicted landings here. The actual landing was here. Predicted and actual literally was at a mile of each other. In the old days, when we didn't have all this tool tech, if I was within 10 miles of where this thing landed, that was a win. Now I complain if I'm greater than half a mile. As most of the time I want to be standing there with the students going, it's going to come down right there. One day, I was having a really good day, and I told all my trackers to drive 3/4 of a mile down that road, stop by the phone pole, open the back door of your car up, and it's going to fly right into your back door. and I missed it like 25 feet. Okay? So we're working on future stuff. And I mentioned that we're doing this on Raspberry Pi 5. The Phil card stuff is amazing. We're also taking USB, converting it into IP streams so you can feed multiple radios and it just shows up on the network. We've been playing around with Google Earth Pro, which is kind of fun. Which you gotta have a really solid network connection outside the outside world. Hello, real time. I mentioned the CM5. The higher performance SDRs, the ones with these with built cards, which are the EOSS minis, which have a better front end, but they're also 6 times the cost. And as one of our guys says, we're in the endless pursuit of decibel dust. Getting involved, we've got multiple teams doing all kinds of stuff. So if you have any interest in customer relations, ground station launch team, gas capacity, we always need forecast answers. So, the tracking and recovery team, if you've got your life insurance paid up, I can talk to me. Dealing with the FAA, it's like having bees in your head. Technology, one leadership, one website management. So, I'll give you guys a PDF of this and you guys put it on your website. Questions, and thank you.
Got 2 questions. In your example that you showed, your lodge like way up north and then recovery down around Burlington. Are you in contact with everybody at the same time through Colorado Connection or your DMR network?
So, RBM.
Okay.
Yeah. And but the other part of this is, okay, call the rally point. Here's where we're going to stop the students. And if you get lost, you go to the rally point, right? And so we've identified every place that has real toilets. Well, I mean, I got somewhere between 50 and 150 students and a bunch of old farts, right?
Someone that hit.
And I'll tell you, welcome back, won't give trains at all. Right? And so, and on top of that, when I started 20 years ago, cell phone coverage was non-existent, right? And that was a whole different set of problems. And it was, once or twice a year, we have somebody that couldn't fly. And it became the 4th balloon, right? It was because we all anybody that couldn't, car broken down, or, right? And you couldn't, because of lack of cell phone coverage, you couldn't call them, right? And you couldn't rate, 50 miles outside of anything. It's not qualified a set does better. It's UHF or PHF. So it's gotten easier and safer. And but that's a great question.
I'll bet. Second one, tell me a little bit about the parachute. I mean, I saw the graphics there. So is it just something that holds it greased on the way up and then it releases it?
Well, actually, the parachute, we don't grease the parachute. So it's hanging there.
Good.
And so when burst happens, there's no atmosphere there. So it won't open
Until 45.
roughly. And what we'll see is we'll see the subrates 8,000-9,000 feet of net, right? And all of a sudden you'll be at 6,000, and then it'd be to 4,000, and it would be 1,100. And then we know that the chute has become tangled with something. And like I said, it's happened where the bottom of the payload string has come up, touch the parachute and entangled it. And then you have the problem of your TNR team is now at least 30 miles away from where this thing's going to land, right? So now you got to figure out how you're going to redeploy them. Where do we think it's coming down? The good news is, so we get telemetry all the way up. We get telemetry all the way down. And below 10,000 feet, our geniuses figured out there was something called CWOPs, which is Citizen Weather Observation Posts, right? And so all these farmers out there at the Eastern Plains have CWOP systems, which report back into the National Weather Service. And so our brilliant guys figured out that they could take the state ahead because below 10,000 feet, that the ground winds are all different than they are above, right? And it's unheard of where ground winds below 10,000 feet can push landing by 10 or 15 miles depending on how high they are. So the good news is once we get 10,000 feet, there's an algorithm that looks at the CWOP data and blends that into what's going on based on what's going up. And that's literally why I can be within a mile or 80 miles out of range. On those guys, I came from an era of vacuum tubes, punch cards, and slide rules. And they taught a language that's Greek today. I'm Greek. So, but, that team developed that software. The other team did this. They all got a meeting of the lines. Then, of course, since we get these deployments, we update. So now, if you look it up the internet, it updates itself. And it's cool. Yeah.
So you're a 501c3. What's the cost on one of these, roughly? And basically, the students, do the tools kick in for the cost of the balloon, the parachute?
The whole bit. Yeah. So NASA's space program, consortium, space track, gets schools interested in doing it, and then they fund it. And the cost of the launch and recovery, depending on several factors, is somewhere in the range between $3,000 and $5,000. So, but all the track and recovery guys get 25 cents a mile to go out there, bang around, and the balloons are not anywhere near as cheap as they used to be. And you can fill in with hydrogen's expensive, all that stuff's got to be moved around and done. So at the end of the year, we're kind of like you guys, but we're not upside down. We did a good job. It's kind of the way it works. One of the guys is got a bunch of racks at Iron Mountain, Denver, and we got a slide and put one of our servers in there that does all this stuff. And we have 100 flights worth of flight data on that server that we'd love somebody to do something with. Because we think there's some interesting things there. We don't have time. We're looking for more people that want to play with numbers. You can take a look at all those and do some interesting calculations that could potentially improve our predictions. If you're without a pilot to, we're kind of good. We've got a problem with loss of tribal knowledge. In the old days, we used to go out and DF things. And, we're talking about flying a flare up ADRS on it just to see if we can get people trained back up. Doing DF work is still needed in after radio. We're out on for somebody with a bad program radio. We've done that. GNRs, malicious interference, all that. But there's only about 4 of us left that can make that work. So, yeah, it's interesting. Yes.
What's the weight usually of all stuff? I mean, down a lot of then there be a standard weight, or is there a maximum weight?
Well, the air mortars were 40 pounds.
Okay.
If you're flying not exempt, which is what we typically fly, which means looking at the says you can go fly and then we'll run airplanes around it. We can fly super heavies, but we don't have the gear to do it. So 30 pounds is probably about the limit.
And you said if the parachute deploys at 40,000 feet, your rate of descent is around 900 feet per second.
No, for that.
For minute.
Company. Yeah. No, if we're at 900 feet a second, if you don't have a parachute. No, it's. Listen, we've seen them come down like that. It's and like I said, we'll be 20 miles. They'll be out on the ground for at least 10 miles before we get there. And so the best thing we can hope for. So APRS packets go up every 30 seconds, right? So when you're dropping that fast, you could hit the ground and it be not even the next packet. And that could be a fair bit of ways. And on the Eastern Plains, the soil's like this, right? And you drop one into a valley and you would have a very hard time hearing it. Again, the problem with VHF is we don't know this. Antenna's got to be big, and if they're coiled up on the ground, they're stuck in the ground. Their effective radiated power is like non-existent. Usually, you can take the last packet, assuming that we got a parachute. You take the last packet, now that we close enough to send a couple of folks out and look around afterwards. And the other thing is, dealt my hand on beacon frequencies, let's be blunt. And Kenwood radios that you can pump the APR flat launch into, you walk out, so it's very handy. Now, the other thing I can need the tracking software is I can paste and the last packet flat launch, and then I can send it out to everybody's smartphones, right? And you can pump it into the map, and then you can just go out and go, this right here. Which in some ways takes all the fun out of it. In some ways, it's all the fun back into it. So, yeah, it's cool. Yes.
What kind of stuff the students put up?
We've seen some amazing stuff. We flew at a CU Boulder Aerospace, have an aerospace farm outlet. And the students decided they wanted to measure the color and temperature of stars in the atmosphere. And so they built this package that had all these little pieces of aluminum tubing facing up. What they did was they realized that you could take colored LEDs and if you ran lights back into that in the range that they made color, they were effectively photometers. And so they flew this thing and collected all this data. And it was like, wow. And I can get a little bit on cockroaches. And so
Well, wait, and that was supposed to make you quite mother.
I'm excited. There's way too go fast. And there's no good. I went by that through that. And so I was on 285. I said, Hugo, everybody over 285. I know what Hugo is, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm driving down there, and some truck driver pulls up in front of me, a lot of trucks, and I see less than brake caliper on the passenger side front, right? I live fucking to Hugo, call 180, and I take all the gear I needed out of the truck and send it on the park bench out there, and ran traffic recovery operations off park bench. Tremblay came up and boat my excursion back to wow, right at the unlimited tone. They were like, and I said, guys, this is an 8,000 excursion. So, yeah, that was fun stuff. And, you know, if any of you folks want to watch the launch, our typical launch site is either Wyndham baseball fields outside of Wyoming, which is just down from lockup state prison out there. And or the Deer Trail public school. Yes.
So for your antennas, and what does those look like? They wire,
Yeah.
rigid, or
Nope. Wire. Typical jade poles for all of them on 300 ohm 12 lead, and with a fair amount of slop on it in terms of, you know, they're not region tight. And then SMA connectors, because we go tight and it can put, we got really good at using shredding that has the adhesive in it. And that's really good for not snapping them right off at the end of the SMA connector. The launch is usually not where you kill things. It's at first. And we had a day, we had occasionally we have a go fever problem, right? And so one day we had a go fever problem, and we had a failure at the top beacon. This was before flying tools, and we were flight qualifying another beacon, right, which is working perfectly fine on the ground, right?
How they always.
Oh, that, you know, well, remind me of the wheelchair story. And so somebody took a 710 kindling, put it on the APRS frequency, right? And put it in a bag. We tied it on the flight string, and off we went, right? And then the problem with the 710 was they didn't kill the turn off in 30 minutes. Right? So 30 minutes later, it's gone. The flight qual hit 35,000 feet. And what happened then? Gone. Right? And we went out and looked for that thing for months. Months. Right? We had the Colorado Cap guys, Civil Air Patrol, getting out to help us. Right? I mean, we have found Jimmy Hoffa. Right? I mean, and you know, we're all despondent because we never failed to bring home. Failed. And about a month later, it was on. What? He goes, I was out with my combine and this thing rolled up in my combine. Oh, then we've got phone numbers, all of this stuff, right? And we also got, you know, this is not a bomb. Do not blow this up. Well, right?
Yeah.
And so the Chinese fly that balloon, right? And everybody's lost their minds, right? So I call NORAD because we're going to fly some balloons. The last thing I want to do is be on the 6 o'clock news with these guys shooting them down with $1 million sideliner air missiles. Like, CGS. So I just do not want to be part of this. And so I call. I finally get a hold of some art, and I'm like, what? And they're like, are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. We get all your FAA notifications. We know more about when you're flying than you do. I'm like, hey, you want to go on what? Next launch? Let's get out. So there were a couple of Air Force people show up, and they're like, this is cool stuff. When was I going to show you dog story?
So how'd you get it out of his combine?
Well, so So he calls us and he goes, so we get trying to get one blow out there and discombobulate this thing, which is taking about, it's 80 feet, right? And it's like, it's on, we're out there with rats. Yeah, and those things, man, you do not want to get sucked up in one of those. Okay. And so we get it out of there. And we hit the power button on the second gas, and it comes right up.
What did the case look like?
Oh, it's the guy steering home. Now the antenna was not like this. But doing, $15 right now later, the thing was fine. And man, we learned a bunch of lessons with that. And one of the biggest ones is the go fever, right? We don't want to disappoint 150 students who spent 4 months on their project doing this and making it all work. And at the other end, I'm standing out there in the field going, guys, we've got a 30 record on getting this stuff back. Let's not bitch it now. And so there's always a bit of a tussle with, do we fly this or do we fly tomorrow? Weather star. And as I've gotten older and longer in the tooth on this job, become more conservative about whether or not we really flying stuff. And so it's certainly cool. Yes.
Is static electricity ever an issue?
Now we did make a mistake one day and flew something through a bunch of bad weather, and we built up some ice on the envelope, and we picked it up in Nebraska. And you know what, Nebraska, they don't have signs on the streets, and that's all the way. Because apparently they just type in money in Nebraska, and then we're out there going, "Which street are you at?" I don't know. Dirt road left, dirt road right. So shifting signs everywhere, and this is where we had really good mapping. So there was a long time where I had atlases with Nebraska and Kansas, places that hopefully we'd never end up. Nowadays, assuming we get nowadays with Starlink, I don't even worry about it anymore. I got the there's an effective speed fusion system, right? So it concatenates Starlink and 5G LTE, and it sends it back. It's out through 3 destinations and put it all back together. I'm at 5 nines reliability, telco reliability. Not particularly inexpensive, but it works. The best part is I can plug my IP phone into it. And that's in the back.
Do you have any liability insurance as far as rain combines shipping down to?
Yes, we do. And I think we screwed that farmer, a bunch of 20s through his bar. It's happened after that. He had so kind of to call us. And that goes to a Google Voice phone number. And so when they leave a message, that calls out to a whole bunch of us and says, "Here's your message," which is really nice because on any given flight, we may have X or Y or Z team out there. So in last year, I spent 148 nights on towards day jobs. So I tried to make as many of these as I felt, which was always fun. And by the way, in Germany, the DMR system on 77 meters uses a 7.5 meg offset. How do I know? And my extra thing, it will issue a license to operate. Yes.
How uniform is the cellular signal on the plains of Colorado?
Hit or miss or hilltop. Depends on where you're at. So,
what do you do for a uniform, try to connect with us, with everything via 5G or LTE?
Well, there's some spots where it works good, and there's spots where it doesn't. But over the last 15 years, it's gotten a lot better. So what I think happened is all the carriers took all their gear they were migrating out of in the metro area, and you were throwing in, we've got these Vs that Nokia charges us $1 million for. What are we going to do with them? Well, we're not going to send them out to recyclable, but one in Burlington.
Is there any cellular carrier that's any better than any other?
Depends on where you're at. So on my 5G, I loaded it with Verizon and AT&T. But, now I'm spoiled with Starlink, and that kind of works. But, and yeah, it's fun. So that's
And Mike, how often do you guys is your flight scheduled? Is it predictable? I've heard you guys on DMR a couple times, but I haven't been able to figure out what exactly that.
well, that's okay. It's neither. But typically, starting in April, because students have enough time to build stuff, right? And we might fly, depending on how industrious our payload crews been building stuff, we may have a flight qualifier before that. Again, we want to fly stuff a couple of times just to make sure it's solid before we fly out. And we're starting to take our third generation stuff and retire it just because it gets beat to death. We had a flight that landed ground winds for 20 miles an hour, and the roads were a clean disaster. And so I parked the whole traffic recovery team away because I didn't want everybody to get stuck, right? And I got the excursion stuff. And I got out. And the guy that was with me, Jeff D, we were driving down the road, we could see the payload, and the parachute's full, right? And I'm going 25 miles an hour, and I'm just catching up. And I'm like, Jeff, he's like, I'm not up, catch Jeff, he'll never catch. Let's run down the road, launch, park the truck, we'll let it come to us. And I'm still, that was July, and I'm still getting dirt out of the truck. The whole engine compartment was literally full, and everything baked on the exhaust system. And I spent a lot of time at the car wash, and it was tap invited back. Yeah, so I left that. That's
So do I understand correctly that you guys will have the band white trucks and everything out at the camp show and at
I've got to check. I'm out of town. I'm doing a project for my customer. He one of their EM sites back in the submission.
but it's possible.
It's possible.
But I know it's the last year. And then a couple launches, maybe April, May, June.
Well, I know we have at least 3 on the books in April. I know we've got at least a couple in May. My problem is I've got to get the National Association of Broadcasters show. And by the time I get the booth bills and go through all that, bring them all it's 13 days in Vegas. I'd rather have knob my limbs.
Right. So if any of the people wanted to come out, experience this, and do they get to hold you through that is
That thing, just send me an email to my call sign at PR and we'll roll out the red body carpet and we'll make sure that the cart machine is warmed up when you make cappuccinos. And if that doesn't work, we carry an AED, oxygen, and jump.
Yeah. Hey, do you know how to use it?
Oh, man, we could jumpstart Los Angeles.
How many other organizations like yours are there in the country?
5 or 6.
Really?
Yeah. And it's so technically challenging to get all this stuff to do this right. I mean, it's a pretty big lift. We've got 40 volunteers. Now, I know that's not anywhere near as big as PRA. You got, what, 300 members or something? Roughly. Yeah. So, but, it's fun. And I got something to do because, like private doc, roads at 80 miles an hour and 8,000 vehicles, 6 radios going simultaneously without a time to start.
You guys have a lot of cooperation. You have super.
Yeah, every year we do something called the Great Plains Super Launch. And that's where all these groups get together and try to run up very extensive bar caps and long stories. Like one of the guys that always comes up with this, who's saying all names, he's always filling his balloon and smoking a cigarette. And I just don't.
Oh my God.
This, I want to get back to the wheelchair start. So, I'm sitting there and I'm having like so great. I'm at the convenience store at Hugo. Right? I've got 4 radios, a computer, and this team's up there, one that's all together. And this guy comes out from Lyman with it. I was Lyman. Yeah, came out from Lyman with this light-minute tow truck. It was fine. Excursion on it, which was a pretty good list. And he's like, "Where do you want this thing blurred?" I said, Ford Service Center, Elizabeth. He's like, really? Yeah. Oh, AAA. It's good. And I was sitting there and now in 20 seconds, thinking about, getting your car to 97 miles one way. And then I had to hook up a ride in to get home. I was thinking, when you go out of the hospital, they put you in a wheelchair. If I did it, your car dealer hooked you up to a tow truck and towed you out to the curb, and that doesn't portend a lot of confidence. So that was very strange. So wheelchair thing. But we looked at me up, and, like I said, the current machine runs really nice on that 6 kilowatt engine we got. Yeah, it works. There's something like that.
One last question.
Sure.
This might be a yes, no, or no comment. Is the government or any of the big aerospace companies ever, I'll tell you on classified stuff? Never not.
Those I thought that kid did a great job, considering it was his 5th start in the NFL, and he didn't get mushed into the ground. I thought that, that was pretty good. Anyway, we're going to I'm doing like Gene Kelly tech answer. I know. I'm actually Logan Serums. Can you talk? Not eight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, pretty good job, Mike. And, again, this is just another shining example of what takes place in our monthly meetings. Great presentations like what Mike just gave us. And I learned a whole heck of a lot. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of research, development, all kinds of things that go into this. Boy, this just touched the surface of how big this iceberg really is in space sciences. So, Mike, I want to thank you for that. Let's give it up for Mike one more time.